am your host, Jonah Jacobs of Behind the Build, and today I have with me Naama Blonder from Smart Density.
Thank you for having me.
When I first reached out to you, you said, I am not on the podcast. And I said, yes, I do. There's a reason why I want to have you on, and that is because of the focus of what your architecture practice is about.
Right, which is not single-family houses.
That's correct.
As a principle, I would say. And yes, we turned down a 6,000 square feet house in Forest Hill because we don't believe that what Toronto needs more of is single-family houses. We need to grow in a way that could sustain our future, which single-family house is probably not the way. And I always share that one anecdote that when I moved to Toronto in my first week, I got on the subway just to explore my new city. And I said, I will get off as, whatever, randomly. And I got off at Bathurst, okay? By all means, not too far. And I remember getting off the station and see this sea of single-family houses. I immediately felt like I'm in the suburbs because that's how suburbs look like, typically. And I remember thinking, how fast is this subway system that you have here in Toronto that I'm in the suburbs so fast? Apparently, you're not in the suburbs. You're a few minutes away from downtown Toronto, and yet you have these neighborhoods of single-family houses because that's how Toronto was built.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, no wonder they have a housing crisis. You're not utilizing your land properly. And that's how my story started.
Well, actually, the story started before this. So let's talk about where the story started, and more importantly, what got you into the story in the first place. What was the earliest inspiration of saying I want to go fix density in cities, like architecture? What led you down this path?
I think, when you go to architecture school, most people, I think, have in mind the public building. We're going to design a library, the most sexy, beautiful things that the public perceives as architecture.
Right.
By the time you graduate from architecture school, you realize that what you really need, or humanity needs, our cities need, is really to figure out housing. And the housing crisis is not special to Toronto. It's, I think, special to our generation, because what worked to our, in our parents' generation doesn't work for us anymore. And that is true when you go to Toronto, when you go to Madrid, when you go to Seoul. Yes, maybe not every city experiences growth the same way Toronto does. It's a fact. Like Toronto is very much leading on growth. But housing as an issue is a generational issue, and that is across the board. So I realized that housing is what I would like to focus on, and I chose Toronto as a growing city that I would like to, and we moved here, my partner just got into U of T to do a master's degree, and I was an intern, and I said, worst case scenario, if we don't like Toronto, we'll go back home, which is Tel Aviv in Israel, and we'll just, what's the worst thing, right? Like more education and more international experience, I think we'll be okay. We were young, before we had children. And
how many years ago was this?
10, exactly 10, 2014. So now it's 2024. I'm just celebrating my 10th here in Toronto.
Congratulations.
Yes, a decade. Yeah. Yeah. And we absolutely loved it. Toronto is a wonderful, wonderful progressive city. And I am reminded of how progressive we are we like to criticize ourselves, but at the same time, we're doing a lot of things really well. Especially if you travel in North America, we are pretty good.
Interesting. I want to go down that road because all I hear from a lot of people is how much we struggle. And so I would like to tap into some of the positive, and I'll do that. I want to do that with you later into our discussion. So just to better understand your path. So where did you start off in school? And you started off in Tel Aviv?
No, I studied in Technion in Haifa, which is considered to be a very, very good school. Maybe, I don't know about architecture, but for computer science, I think it's like third in the world. And I think it also has it's the number one Nobel Prize winners per capita or something. So the Technion is very well known, very good school. And then we left Haifa right away. As we graduated, we moved to Tel Aviv. Tel Aviv is an amazing city in terms of its vibrancy. It's such an incredible city. I really very much recommend visiting it and seeing what a lively city it is.
I was there.
You were?
Yeah. I actually wear around my neck one of the dog tags that I was given on a trip.
So a recent trip?
No, this was my trip was 2007.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The last
I was on a birthright.
A birthright.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was quite an experience, and traveled to Haifa, and I was all throughout the country.
I think I was 2007. Okay. Yeah. So a long time ago.
Long time ago. Yeah,
you should visit it again, but it's a great city.
I'll say this, and the time that I was there was the first presidential visit by George Bush.
Okay.
Yeah, and I was actually supposed to have lunch with a friend in Jerusalem.
Okay.
And they shut down.
And they shut down, yeah.
So I couldn't get in to have lunch. He was inside. I was on the outside. I said, I guess I'll see you back in Toronto.
Yeah.
Small anecdote. Taken away from what you're discussing. Sorry. Go ahead.
No. Where were we?
We're talking about school in Haifa. And
we moved to Tel Aviv. And Tel Aviv is a very nice city. And we decided, as I said, we were pretty young. Cost of living in Tel Aviv is unbearable. Was in 2012, which is, when I graduated. It's just, I didn't understand how it's all going to work out. And that is one of the things when people talk about affordability in Toronto, I keep bringing up. I know that people will leave. And we are seeing it. Like there are already very scary numbers of how many people leave Toronto and how many immigrants come here and then leave because Toronto cannot keep up with the promise that Toronto has. And every time that I hear, Canada is a big country, no one is coming here if not for the big, for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Exactly. The opportunities that the big city has to offer. I don't know how many immigrants would hear about Oakville, Ontario, but they heard of Toronto, Vancouver, maybe Montreal if, it had what they're looking for. But
you don't think they were foaming at the mouth to go to Saskatchewan?
Exactly. So I know what happens when cities become so unaffordable that people just pack and go, because city needs to offer an opportunity to stay, which Toronto, and we just mentioned that I've been here for 10 years. Yeah. I moved here because Toronto was my affordable option, or it offered a sustainable future. As someone coming from Tel Aviv with a cost of living, probably, also lower salaries, but cost of living is extremely difficult, perhaps still is in Tel Aviv. So since I moved here a decade ago, I've seen Toronto's affordability in decline. And I know what happens. I mean, look at San Francisco. There are people living in RVs. And it's not unlikely that a city will become so unaffordable. And we are really standing in our own way. A lot of it is culture, of not welcoming any built form that is higher than
6 stories.
And even the 6 stories is quite a debate around it. So, yeah.
So you saw this massive need, whether it's here in Toronto or in other cities. But the metropolis of what Toronto is, it's a melting pot for people to immigrate to and also natural growth from within. So there is a lot, and it is like the urban sprawl of the city is happening at a pretty substantial scale.
And it always has been. Like the city has grown substantially with introducing the streetcars, right? Yeah. That's why we have those neighborhoods. And they were built on, first of all, with the streetcar, but also very much dependent on the automobile, on cars.
Yeah.
And now we see that we keep growing, but look at traffic, right? Is that a pleasant...
To get here for the interview,
Yes.
the reason I was late was because they were doing work on a railroad track on a road that I couldn't get through.
Absolutely. I kind of think that anyone who drives to Adelaide and Richmond, which is the two streets that I live and work in, has some sort of a death wish. I don't know how to explain it. It's just, you can't get through with a car. We don't own a car. We get everywhere. We both have e-bikes.
Yeah.
I have one child seat. My partner has the one with the two child seats.
Yeah.
That's our SUV. Because you really
That's our SUV.
you really can get away with a car in the city, and we chose to live in a place that doesn't require me to have a car. I'm also very much privileged. I work with my life partner. We chose where the office is. I get it. But I do believe, and even before I had my own business, I made my life choices in a way, like I would never go and work for an architecture firm that is north of St. Clair, for example, right? Because it's not sustainable to commute there. And I think the reason we are located in downtown Toronto also attracts the talent that I want to believe in what we do. And I don't think any of them owns a car as well. And, you mentioned how much Toronto is growing. And, more than half of Torontonians weren't born in Toronto. And many of them live their entire lives in apartments, 4 or 5 bedroom apartments. That's how I grew up.
Yeah.
So probably you don't need to convince many of Torontonians that living in apartments, in condos is an appropriate way to live.
Yeah.
But it's still very much, first of all, there's kind of a chicken and the egg because you don't have here decently sized apartments.
Yep.
Even when we found our 3 bedrooms, it was, and we're architects in the industry, and it was very hard to find.
Was it 900 square feet? Is it 1,000 square feet?
It's just under 1,100. Yeah. Still, it was very hard to find. Yeah. And, my parents visited me last year and they don't live in Canada and they said, we're so proud of you. This is such a beautiful apartment. What a great location. We're really so happy for you. You're missing the 4th bedroom. And I was like, Dad, show me 1 4-bedroom in this city.
Wow. You'd have to buy the condo.
You need to build it. You can build it. You can practically, if you want it, you can build it.
Which isn't exactly sustainable.
No.
It's not really falling in line with what you're talking about.
And even those, I hear that, buy the unit next door. The unit next door has a kitchen, 2 bathrooms. It will be a very, very expensive, not to mention condo fees are paid by square footage. So, because I know the very few are very fortunate who can do that, but it's not the way, that's not how you're supposed to do it. Let's put it that way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just a different way of living.
So it's a chicken and the egg. Yeah. People don't live in apartments because these not exist. And developers, every time I bring it up in one of my talks, because I talk a lot about it, developers, there always a lineup of developers telling me how wrong I am, that no couple in the right mind will get into apartments, and it's because the market doesn't want it, so developers don't build it. And if there was a market for it, they will build it. And do I know how expensive construction cost is that no one could afford a family-sized apartment? Right. And just in case I need to make it very clear, I'm not talking about a 2,000 square foot house on the 12th floor. That's clearly not. There's a trade-off. Yes. And the trade-off is, yes, you'll come to my condo. I promise you won't say this is the largest home you've ever seen, but I chose a lifestyle that buys me a lot of time by walking to school, to daycare, riding my bike. I spend more time with my kids. So there's a trade-off, and I trade off. My trade was space for time.
And look, I live now, we renovated our house, but our house and many houses in the area I live in are semi-detached homes. Mm-hmm. And those semis are 625 square feet per floor. Mm-hmm. So pretty much almost negating the basement.
Right.
And originally these basements were not usable basements.
Right.
So really,
It's not.
You're talking 1,250 square feet.
Right.
It's not
And
much
you have
more than what
stairs.
you're talking about. And you have stairs. And you're outside of the core of the city. So yes, the vehicle that comes into play, commuting all over the place.
And that's, I always give this comparison because a very close friend of mine, one of my best friends, we were looking for a home at the same time. We both wanted 3-bedroom. We wanted 3-bedroom, 2-bath. And she found something, a 3-bedroom, 4-bath, over 3 stories, 1,700 square foot. I already told you what I have, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,100 square foot. I live in Toronto. She bought in Vaughan. Immediately she had to buy a second car because she moved from a condo to Vaughan.
Yeah.
She had a condo in Toronto, I should say. And she had to buy a second car.
Yep.
Don't even get started on cost of having 2 cars. We can calculate it if you want, but it's in the tens of thousands of dollars yearly. And, you say, oh, buying condo in Toronto is not affordable. She paid 20% more than what I paid in Toronto. So when we think of what is affordable, what are our options, and especially what we can afford, I think many miss or look at it the wrong way because as I mentioned, all of this, the comparison, and she paid 20% more before the 2 cars, just on the home she bought. So
now, we've talked about what this problem is. So tell me, you create the practice of smart density.
Yes.
To now work on
smart density.
Reinventing.
We work on smart density. Every project has to be near transit. It has to be multi-unit. It has to be for me, affordability is a spectrum. For me, if we offer market condos to families, for me, it's affordable. It counts under affordability. Not every affordability needs to be social housing. We also have shelters. We did one project of 29 beds in Ossington in a prefab. So we also do have that because that's another very, very big problem that we have here. But Smart Density is the name of the company, and we have checkbox that every project we take needs to be Smart Density.
And so who's coming to you?
Developers who, I've heard it before, were saying, we know what we could get from others and we wanted something fresh. We saw your videos. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. As you probably noticed, I have strong opinions on...
You?
Yes. Have you noticed or not yet? And so it's easy to know what I believe in. And I think it filters my clients. If you don't believe in it, you probably won't call me. But if you feel like, a lot of them were like, where have you been so far? Like how, this type of feeling. They buy into our vision. I think everyone on my team shares the vision. And I think, as I said, it's also a generational thing because I see that as well.
One thing that I've noticed and I've discussed with some others is that the next generation of homeowners, a lot of them are not getting their license. A lot of the next generation is just skipping the license. They don't want to drive.
Yeah.
It's either ride sharing or it's something else, but it is not anything to do with
driving is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know how people do it. But sometimes people tell me, it's my freedom. That's 100% the opposite of freedom when you are you're trapped in traffic.
Yeah.
And I think, let's talk about the future because, we're not sitting here in Paris where every block literally has an entrance to a subway, right? Like we have a very long catch up to do when it comes to transit.
Yeah.
And yes, we're sitting here, the King Bathurst station is going to be 2 blocks down, right?
Yeah.
Like we're in Richmond and Bathurst, and it's going to be at King and Bathurst. It's going to take 10 years, probably.
Is it our generation that's going to benefit from this? I don't know that we'll see the completion of it.
Whatever that is, future generations will thank us the same way. Like we either thank previous generations or mad at previous generations that they didn't do more.
Right.
But whatever that is, it's needed. The future of mobility in cities is not by driving your private car, period, end of story. Now the question is, how do you do micro mobility, like e-bikes, like other things, car share? I don't own a car. I take an Uber for the last mile. If I have a project in Oslo, I'm not going to take the GO train and then 6 buses to get somewhere. I will take the GO train, see how everyone is standing in traffic on 401, and I will, take an Uber in the last mile, first and last.
Right.
I will ride my e-bike pretty much like I got as far as, I think, Eglinton and Kiel so far, which is pretty decent, like across the entire city.
I would say.
Yeah.
How long did that take? 40 minutes?
Something like that, yeah.
On an e-bike?
On an e-bike, yeah. And I only ride on bike lanes. Like, I won't just go on, like, I don't know, Bathurst or Spadina. So I'm do it very safely. And this is something, if you ask me if there, the sad days where I'm like, I don't know how we're going to solve the housing crisis, but you see how many bike lanes are being built safely, elevated, separated from the road. And I know drivers hate that, but I always say, even if you love driving, you should be the number one supporter of those bike lanes, because it just takes drivers off the road to the bike lane.
Reduces risk for both parties.
Exactly, and actual quantity of drivers, right? Because I think those cyclists, if they didn't have the option to cycle, would actually drive and not necessarily take TTC. So I think it's a win-win for both the drivers and car lovers versus biking. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at.
And so we've talked a little bit about what you're looking for in terms of a solution, how you get there with some of the developers that come to you. What I didn't, to be honest, get to in the middle of that was you moved here.
Yep.
You have this practice. At what stage of being here did you open practice? How long ago?
Right. So when I moved here, I found my first job at Urban Strategies, which is a wonderful planning firm. And it's really funny because when I moved here, I was, looking for a job in architecture, and Urban Strategies is an urban planning firm. And it's really funny how sometimes in life you need to go where you need to go. Like my husband was a student, I had to work. So I took the first job that was offered, which is, again, a wonderful firm to have your first job as an immigrant to a new country. And then I got my hours to get my license in architecture. But then the fact that I was working in an urban planning firm became one of the greatest advantages that I have as an architect, because I am now both. I'm a licensed architect, and I got my registration as an urban, or accreditation as an urban planner, because why not? I was already able to do that. But one of the things that is kind of shocking to me is how little architects know and understand in the policy that really determines what they could build and how and where. And it's only in North America that urban planning is separated from architecture. The European model, there is no urban planner. When I moved here and I got my first job, I had to explain to people back home that urban planner is actually much like a lawyer, because it's policy and it's precedent based, and they're actually not designers at all. They work in Word and Excel, and it's a North American creation of an industry, right? Like in the European model, like we talked about my school, the degree, exactly. It's like architecture and urban planning. It is never separated, because urban planners are designers. They need to understand how three-dimensional planning looks like. So here, and every project that we take, we are the architects and the urban planners. We like to control the design and control the messaging with the city. That's not how the model works. There are architects and there are planners. And by the way, I critiqued only architects. Planners rarely understand three-dimensional aspects of the work. Like if you ask them, like, what is the width of things, right? Like, how do you design access to parking, whatever. So I'm burning way too many bridges right now, but this is how our industry is divided. And
also,
I think it works against us.
I will say this. This is maybe an interesting little take for you, but generally there are controlled burns
Mm-hmm.
that happen in the world to be able to allow for a forest to regrow.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you have to burn those bridges in order for them to be
Right.
built.
Right. With two complete industries, but that's okay.
That's okay. Look, not. I think not everybody always gets it, and that's why you have to help illuminate the dark, right?
I think our city, and I said what I said because our city is in a crisis, and architects must step up and play a much more critical role in the political discourse that we have. But we don't really, and I say it as architects, right? They don't. And we should be more vocal. We should understand the policy more, right? If the zoning allows or doesn't allow for something, and you know, we talk about single family houses. For decades, all you could do is demolish a house and build a bigger house, which is that's how you pay your bills, right? But that is a fundamental problem of having a ratio of one family per one lot and nothing more than that. The options never existed until recently, where they increased it to fourplex.
Right, which is an interesting conversation I had.
It's an interesting conversation. Is it enough for Toronto? In my opinion, no.
Yeah, but you have to start somewhere.
Fine,
right?
I'll take it. It's maybe more appropriate to Kitchener and Mississauga, but with all due respect, Toronto and Kitchener and Mississauga are facing very different growth. So, and also the other thing is, when you talk about a fourplex, it means that you are putting now the risk and responsibility of solving our housing crisis in the hands of homeowners, individuals, not professionals, who don't know much about real estate, are going to refinance their house in order to probably afford construction. And it is a very, very, very risky game to play. So from our government perspective, to say, oh, we're going to solve the housing crisis by allowing fourplexes, it is a ridiculous statement to have.
I mean, we started off before even recording talking about government.
Yes.
I mean, that's a whole other topic. You know, you look at the way that the country's currently being run between two separate parties, and the province, and then as a country. And
municipal, on the municipal government, you have the third party. So It's an interesting.
Look, there's a reason also why I think a lot of people that have opinions about all of this don't go into politics.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because they don't want to deal with all the barriers that they're going to be met with. Instead, they try to solve it through the means that they can, and that is like opening a practice like smart density.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, what do the projects look like that you're taking on in like a full capacity? So
right.
Are you now starting to look at these fourplexes? Are you looking at? Okay, so tell me. Go ahead.
I'll give you one that we're very proud of. So 2 years ago, Brookfield called and said, we have 115 acres near a future GO station that we're looking for something new and fresh, and we want you to design it. And technically, it's a brand new neighborhood, right? Like, think about it. It's 3 times City Place.
115 acres.
Yeah. So for that, obviously, it's a very long-term planning process.
An ambitious planning process.
And how do you design for the future? How do you take things into, flexible enough, not as big, but we're also working with the Leon's family on their 45 acres on Jane and 401, which is converting industrial land into a full neighborhood. Again, 45 acres, that is the size of City Place. So they're
great, by the way, the Leon's.
I'll let them know.
I know them too.
Okay. So, and then you ask yourself, okay, what is the type of neighborhood of the future that you can do? So on both neighborhoods, but specifically the Brookfield one, 2/3 of the streets in this new neighborhood is going to be either car free or car light, and a third will be traditional vehicle streets.
What does car light mean?
So it's basically a shared street. If you are familiar with the European term, it means that it's, first of all, pretty narrow. The car, the driver gets the signals that You can't drive too fast. It is not meant to hold a lot of traffic. It's local, residential, intimate street. It's just that there is car access to it.
Got it. Okay.
A third is, again, you can drive 80 kilometers per hour, whatever you want to do. But for example, one of the speaking of bike lanes, we said we have enough of space to have safe bike lanes on the 2/3 of the streets, and our vehicle streets do not have bike lanes, for example. So, and I also want to talk about, this is going into urban design a little bit, but the way we design is very much not car dependent. Yes, cars are here to stay. I acknowledge that. They're part of our lives for now. But at the same time, how do you create environments that, and I kept thinking about the family that is going to live there. And I wanted them to say, the moment I open my door, it doesn't feel like I'm opening it to a 4-lane street. It feels much more European. I feel safe if my kids decide to play in the street, like the Dutch street style. And it's something that I feel like in North America, in Toronto, we just took for granted, that we don't need to have this quality of life where our streets are serving us as pedestrians, as people, versus just driving everywhere. As I said, I have nothing against cars. Okay, maybe that's not a good statement, but cars are here for now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We have parking in our units. We have streets that you can drive. But how do you design places that you feel that they are charming? The same way, you go to Europe and you say...
The streetscape, right?
It's the streetscape, but it's also as early as the width of the street, right? Because what happens now is you go and the traffic engineer will tell you, okay, we need 2 lanes here, 2 lanes there, 1 parking lane, okay, 6 lanes. 6 lanes, and that's before wide sidewalks and bike lanes, and if you have streetcar, let's talk about Waterfront Toronto. They have Villiers Island that is supposed to be the neighborhood of the future. And I do want to give credit to Waterfront Toronto because they're doing really hard work, raising the bar. They're trying so hard. But then they have a 40-meter right-of-way. A 40-meter street, it's 2/3 of the Gardiner. Why do we need 2/3 of the width of the Gardiner in our neighborhood of the future? What type of equality are you going to get with this massive, just because we have this wish to accommodate everything? So again, we're getting into urban design, and I gave you one example of our project, but it's like this type of questions, right? Like, what is the future? How are we going to design something that it's okay to change the rules? Like when we came to the municipality of this new neighborhood, we said, we received 2 awards for this vision that we designed, and we came with the awards.
Local awards?
The Ontario Association of Architects awarded it for best public well-being and public health, and best made in Canada urban innovation by the World Urban Pavilion. So we came to the municipality and said, yes, we need you to rewrite your rules, but also this is going to be your legacy project. So it's okay to ask to break the rules sometimes.
That's pretty cool.
Yes, no, it's very cool.
I just sat there quietly, thinking about that. And how you present that to the municipality.
Yeah.
And they, for all the things that they can and can't do, it sounds to me like the ambitions of what you're, sorry.
No, there's need to be a political will.
Yeah.
And we talked a little bit about politics. I feel that in Toronto, if we would solve the housing crisis much faster if it wasn't as political. And the way we make decisions is so political.
But political here, it's political everywhere. I feel like less so in like a European city where it is.
I think you underestimate how much of an NIMBY culture it is in Toronto.
You're speaking about this and seeing people on a different scale than I am, so you're definitely far more well-versed at your knowledge on this topic. So.
I was on the Ontario Association of Architects panel, and the panelist next to me showed a building in intersection of Danforth and Broadview, 6 stories, 33 units, 48 underground parking spots. that's pre-application was 12 years ago. Okay, do you run the numbers? 12 years, 6 stories, 33 units, 48 underground parking. Now you're in construction. I don't need to tell you that there's no financial viability to this building. I hope to see it in its finish line, but it's not sustainable, right? And then so the developer presented that at the panel. The topic of the panel was housing. And then at the end of the panel, there was a senior architect, took the mic and said, my family has been living here for 3 generations. We conducted a build form study to determine what is the appropriate build form for the intersection of Danforth and Broadview. And we determined that the appropriate build form is the missing middle. That's why you see 6 stories. Danforth and Broadview. And just to explain, it's an intersection of a subway line and a streetcar line. And everything in her sentence appalled me. We've been living here for 3 generations. It means that the entitlement that the fact that you've been living, what about the next 3 generations? Okay, you've been living here for 3 generations. Good for you. What about the future 3 generations that won't be able to live here because you determined that nothing is appropriate for this intersection of a subway and a streetcar line? Take a look at the Danforth. Nothing is possible on the Danforth because the way the city identified it is that the first properties on the Danforth are designated mixed use. Okay, you can see some intensification there, but all of them are too shallow to accommodate, by the way, by the city rules, to accommodate a mid-rise building or not to mention a taller building because they are backing into the neighborhoods, the yellow. So if you look at it at the Danforth, one of 2-3 subway lines, functioning subway lines that we have, and the Danforth is nothing more than 2 stories. That is a problem. It's a problem. We talked about new transit. We're not utilizing the transit that we have. We actually conducted a study here at Smart Density where we teamed up with a GIS data app called Ratio City, where we checked how much of underutilized land we have near transit, and we measured by land use. So we took out heritage, we took out FSI. If it's already built out, it's not underutilized. We found that there are 273 square kilometers near transit, existing transit. 273 square kilometers. Then we modeled several stations. Do you know how many homes we have? The potential capacity, I'm not saying we should build those, but just to say the potential capacity, it's to 7.6 million homes to accommodate near existing transit. Again, this is to demonstrate future capacity, but you know why we took this study? Because people are telling me Toronto is maxed out. We are done. We are dense enough. We should start showing people the direction to other cities. So the statement that we are maxed out is a ridiculous statement. We are not even reaching anything of the density that we should have.
It's a lot of homes.
It's a lot of homes, and again, if you think about it, it's just to demonstrate capacity, to say, for those who say we're maxed out, we are actually not.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this will ever be built, and who cares? But we are not at capacity.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, given what we do, hearing that is
and this is just by land near transit. Like if you're in the neighborhoods and you're far away from transit, that's fine. I don't see it as an.
Is this existing transit or this
existing transit? We took
that also
2
changes the numbers
of planned.
Because then the number even
it increases for sure.
Exponentially.
There are 13,000 units that are planned along the future Ontario line. New 13,000 units. I don't know. That number doesn't sound too high to me because we need more than that in comparison to a $25 billion investment in new transit. But our research, we took existing transit and we just divided it into 2 groups. Subway and GO and LRT, and bus and streetcar. So we had different like intensification next to it because but the bus, if you talk about affordability, it's definitely a very important method of transportation.
Can I ask this question? Because given all the studies and knowledge that you have on all of this, what does it look like from a planning standpoint for school boards? Because given the amount of density that's currently infiltrating the city and ramping up for more, and given what you just described as a new project, was it the Northwest End? You're talking about just one year awards.
No, that's east of Oshawa. A new go-to. Yeah.
Sorry. Northwest.
Yeah.
Completely the wrong.
No. Jane and 401. That's the Lyons site.
So you take something like that, and you think about all of the new population that can fill that space. So how do they get educated? Where are schools?
I think schools, TDSB is an organization that is rich in land and poor in cash. Right. It needs to team up with developers and have a school in the podium of a tower. Those days of, big plot of land that accommodates a 2-story school are over. And the model of the future is mixed use.
Yes, or schools in the base of a condo building.
That's what I meant, like a podium. Yeah. And then TDSB, and it's interesting that you're saying because some areas are at high capacity and some areas are closing because of low demand. And many of our neighborhoods are actually, because of aging population, are actually shrinking. We are now sitting in Ward 10, which is the Spadina Fort York. Yep. Since the last census struck in 2021, this ward grew in population more the entire city combined. Okay? And yet it's really funny that everyone else gets to decide how we how we get around in this ward and how, right? Like we are the fastest growing ward in the city.
You're the trendsetter.
And yet everyone else, including suburban councillors, are making decisions about what happens in the city.
Right. Because to me, one of the biggest current flaws I see in how the growth is happening is that not even just the Toronto School Board, any of the school boards are not looking at providing a plan for what the future of these densified areas
I want to give them credit that they do. I don't know. Okay. I don't know I can't approve or deny. I want to give them a credit that it's something that keeps them up at nights because you go to Yonge and Eglinton and you see those signs. This school, also on condo boards, by the way, like if you buy a unit, it's like, you should know that you're not getting into this school district.
You're going to be bused.
Yes.
Yeah, you're going to be bused. They're going to send these kids out. Some bus driver is going to be picking up these kids from these dense areas and driving them for 45 minutes to another school. And in many ways that's not.
How do your kids get to school?
Currently, one of our children walks. Yeah. We walk them. They're 2 blocks. Yeah. From school, and my other child is at a specialized school that's across the city. So we have to drive her there.
You drive her.
Yeah. It's the only way that it could work.
Yeah. My daughter goes to French immersion, and she's also getting on a bus. Not that it's that far, but I'm also grateful for having. I have no clue. She talks to me in French, and I'm like, "What?" My kids will have a secret language, like the same way my parents talked English when they didn't want us to understand. Yeah. I don't have that privilege because my kids speak their mother tongue and English, so they will have a secret language. But I don't speak French.
Quand je suis petit garçon, when I was a little kid, I was in the French immersion, and that's pretty much the extent of it.
Okay, that's it. Okay, we sent it there because it adds a layer.
Yes.
Let's bring it back to housing. It adds a layer of housing options and choices that people make.
I only bring it up to you because of the amount of advocacy you put forth in all of this.
Right.
I'm thinking like on one of those next presentations that that is incorporated into it
Yeah.
and presented to the TDSB or to, you know, the Catholic School Board or whoever it has to be presented to, so that they become aware of this need and that you're...
I'm sure, like, how could they not? Like, how...
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But when I'm sitting across from an architect and a planner, you know, I have to put it out there.
And I think, you know, there are many advantages of teaming up with a private sector developer.
Yes.
Who, you know, build the school. Like, we are very close to City Place. Mm-hmm. Their school is the highest ranked in downtown. It's at capacity, which is funny because City Place started as this neighborhood for, you know, young and single. Yeah. And those young and single found their mate and made babies.
They found somebody and made some babies.
Because this neighborhood is one of the most thriving, vibrant, wonderful neighborhoods. They have a brand new community center that I take my kids every week.
Yeah.
It's amazing. We have friends that live there and the kid go to the school and, you know, it's literally the commute of taking the elevator and crossing the street. So it's a wonderful neighborhood. And that school and community center were built by the developer with Section 37 money from the well. So Section 37 is basically, we don't use Section 37 formula anymore. Well, it became a formula, but basically it's community benefits that a developer pays the city that goes into a pool yeah. for improvements. So the school was built from Section 37 money by the developer of City Place.
Yeah.
So you see what I didn't say? I didn't say TDSB. TDSB didn't pay for it, didn't have to worry about it. And that exactly. And that is one of the benefits of partnerships, which I feel that in Canada, or Toronto, I should say, the private sector suffers from a certain image and reputation.
You did a very good job navigating those words in your mind as I watched you pull that out. That was good.
I'm trying.
Because, look, this topic is a big topic in discussion with, and I've had this with some of the other people that are either I've already discussed in their episode, or I have upcoming, and it's been a part of our discussion leading into what we're going to discuss, because it is such an important discussion. It is. The densification of a city, the way that you look at this, the way that you can develop a neighborhood around some of the densification, and the use of what is in, and I apologize if we're going to forget, in the podium, mm-hmm. right? What's located in the podium of these buildings largely plays a crucial role in how well this building can perform.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
The idea of having tall units is amazing. The biggest complaint that you hear from neighborhoods mm-hmm. is the shadow, right? That's why majority of people don't want the infiltration.
I think that the word shadow is a magic word that the public was taught that the word shadow didn't come from the public. It came from the system that we have, and let me tell you from, the city's perspective, all of those negotiations about the height. Why is it the city sees itself protecting the public by negotiating height? Where does this idea come from? And do you want to talk about shadows? Fine. I have a problem that in order, we as a society prioritize someone's private backyard over 60 new homes, because oftentimes, it cuts, we have those tools that say, oh, okay, this is a private backyard, so we need to take this angular plane, and that angular plane determines that this building cannot be, on a subway, cannot be more than 16 stories. Why? On a subway, we need to have tall buildings. And by the way, that example is a real example. There's a building in Ossington. I don't remember if it's 16 stories or 19 stories. The city was not supporting it because there was some backyards that, that exactly. And I have a problem with that statement that we prioritize someone's backyard over 60 new homes. I do have a problem with that.
So can I ask?
Not to mention that shadows, if you really want to give the full thing, a shadow of a tower moves much faster than a shadow of a wide building. And in winter months, the sun is so low that even our precious little neighborhoods of 2 stories cast a pretty long shadow. Challenge me in winter to see it for yourself. So all of that's why I said it's kind of this magic word. It's not a real thing. It's not, and welcome to, living in a big city. And I don't criticize people's choice of you want to live in a big house with a backyard. I'm not here to criticize that choice. All I'm saying is that you cannot do it near a subway, like steps away from a subway, and determine that no one else could live there. And this is exactly what our planning system allows. It empowers you, the privileged homeowner, to determine that no one else gets to live in your neighborhood. And that is a problem.
So what do you do? What do you do with green space?
If you want to calculate shadows on green space, no problem.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let's do that. We can do that.
I'm not talking about the shadows. I'm talking about within the densification of what
sure.
we're describing.
Sure.
Because we're talking about putting up towers.
But that's exactly what preserves the land to keep it, right? The moment you're stacking up, you have land open up for open space. So the way the system works is that every development needs to have a 15% of the land as parkland dedication. Now, not every site could dedicate 15% of their land, so there's cash in lieu for that, and that is totally fine. By the way, one of the things that the province said to the city is that they're not using their parkland dedication money to actually build parks and do those open space improvements, and one of the latest bills said that they need to use it within 6 months. So it's not the evil developer who doesn't want the park. It's the way our system works but here along Queen Street, we're now gonna get 2 new parks. One is here on Queen and Augusta, and there's gonna be another one on Richmond and John.
If you're listening to this and you're wondering, what is all of this going to look like for our city, and how are we going to get to enjoy our city, and we want to preserve and protect our neighborhoods. And I will say, yes, in what we do at Walden, we work on single family residential. We don't work in multi-unit residential as much, and we don't work in commercial construction at all, right? And so
that's why I asked you if you're sure you want to interview me.
And I do, because I think these types of conversations are very important to have, because it provides perspective into things that we may or may not be thinking about in our regular days. And it allows us to be able to step beyond what we do all the time and think about more than just us.
And, you mentioned Brenda Eisen, who you had an episode with her, and that's how we got to know each other. There is definitely, what I talk about is drastically in direct access to transit, because also building more underground parking and more cars, that's not the density that I want.
Yeah.
There are a lot, I mentioned the underutilized land near transit, but there's these areas that I call everything else. And the everything else is those areas that are not in good accessibility, or are not as don't have access to transit. Have your private and backyard there, single family house. There is a place for it. I am just talking about the social and cultural phenomena of homeowners directly on a subway preventing everything else.
Yeah.
And that is a big problem.
I agree. I do. I might also annoy some people in saying this. I don't intend to, but it is an important adjustment that needs to happen in order for our children to be able to live in this city.
Absolutely.
Because if you're out there and you're working in this field and you think about your kids, depending on their age, or your grandkids, you will know for certain that it is going to be near impossible for them to do.
Thank you very much. I talk about it all the time. For those of you who think that this is some sort of an affordability crisis, just imagine this place in 25 years. If we are not going to make some drastic changes in the way we plan and build. And by the way, it's not just the way we plan. Right now we have a severe construction cost crisis.
Yes.
Which I'm sure you will be able to speak to way better than I do, because several of my buildings that already have permits were put on hold because of a combination of interest rates and construction costs. So I would say that construction cost kills more projects than we're able to. And maybe, you know, in order to make the numbers work, we need to make sure that the planning side, the approval side, approves something that has enough meat on it that is going to carry construction costs.
I will tell you, it is really, really hard. And you know, in what we do in single family residential, you're dealing with the end user, right, who is financing the project. It is a completely different world when you're dealing with it as a developer, and you need to be able to hit certain targets on your financials to be able to move this thing forward in some way. And look, the same thing applies to the residential owner, but the scale is different.
Yeah.
Right? Substantially different. And the impact is substantially different.
Right.
And so when you really you look at this, yes, it is really, really hard to budget accurately because of the fluctuation in cost.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard.
Yeah.
It is not something that I think I would ever want to take on as a developer. And when Walden first started, we were doing small flips. So they're buying homes in like the Allenby area and topping them up and then selling them.
Yeah.
And so to move away from that and to do it for people, and then the concept of moving away from that and doing it on like a large scale, there's
it's scary.
Ton of risk.
Yeah.
Ton of risk. So I have to tell you, it has been such an incredible conversation. So enlightening.
Thank you.
I'm really thankful for it. As you know, this is a podcast. It's powered by Walden Homes. We really value the relationships that we bring together on this podcast and the information that we can provide as a result of this podcast to potentially the end user, other people in the industry. I really thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Thank you for providing all of your insights. I did not ask you. You touched on it throughout the entire episode, which is why I didn't ask you directly. About family. You've talked about your husband, you've talked about your kids.
Yeah.
What do you do? I know that I was almost doing my segue out of the episode here, but I didn't even ask the question. What do you like to do for fun?
Wow. First of all, I really love what I do.
Yes.
So it fills me. I'm very happy. I'm very, very fortunate and grateful for having, building a business in a country, in a new country that I, absolutely knew no one. So I'm very grateful for that. So I guess I don't feel that I need like a very expensive hobby to fill my life, but I love traveling. I just got back from Portugal. I was there with my sister. It's very important to go see places and try to bring the best to Canada. And that's it. I love walking in the city. I enjoying everything the city has to offer and do it with my kids, which I think it's an incredible city to raise children.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.